we shouldn't get obsessed by weight and things like that. It's not really about that for me. It was just a sign that needed to trigger me back into action. I saw that when I got back, and it has triggered me back into action. It's given me a bit of a purpose again, give me some focus, give me some motivation.
Even though my sleep was not great because it was a hot room and it wasn't pure blackout. And I think if I'd had a cool room and blackout, my HRV would be super high at that time. But it's just to show like just how powerful that nature could be.
The minute you point out what someone's thinking about or doing is often when it all falls apart.
Afternoon, Nick. How you doing, buddy? It's been a long time since we connected. So I'm looking forward to catching up. How's it going?
Yeah, it's all right, buddy. Yeah, it has been a while. I mean, we've both been through quite a lot since we last connected, right? So it's been times. It's been up, it's been down, it's been good, it's been bad. It's lots has happened, but it's really good to connect.
So
I'm excited for the call.
You're looking quite tan. So obviously, and I know you've been away. You sent me a couple of pictures as you were going. But you've been back about a week now. So I think we last connected. It must have been. If you've been back a week and were you away for a week or 2 weeks? And then we missed a week. Yeah, then we missed a week before that, I think, as well. So it must have been about a month. Because I've been down here in Brighton almost a month, and we haven't had a call since I've been here, I think. So tell us what's been going on. I think you had your dad's funeral. Was that before or after your holiday, or?
Yeah, no. So obviously lost my dad on the 18th of March. So hence we haven't really recorded, because straight after that, literally we headed off. We had a holiday already booked in Nicaragua. So we went to a place called Calala Island, which was great. Really, and probably couldn't be better timed, really, because you get hit with the news of losing your dad, and it's kind of a time of like there's several waves hitting you at once, and there was a chance for me to rest, recuperate, and reflect. I'd added the R in there for the usual rest and recuperation, and yeah, it was good. And I got into my writing, did lots of writing, and put all of my grief into words for my mum, which I found quite therapeutic for me and hopefully helpful for her. And then I came back, and literally 24 hours after I returned, I was at my dad's funeral back in Salisbury, seeing family. We called it celebration of life, which is what we tried it to be. I did a reading and a short speech, for want of a better word, for my dad as well. Me and my brother got up, so that was quite difficult, but we did it. And my dad actually said to me, "Look, if you're gonna, I don't want anyone crying on my funeral. So if you can't hold it together, I'd rather you didn't speak." So that was, I had my walls up and had the pressure of my dad's words in my head. I mean, of course, he'd have understood if I did, but I managed to hold it together. So I was pleased about that. Celebrated that, had a really good night in the evening, just having a couple of glasses of whiskey and whatever in his honor. And then back home, straight into work. So I've had a brilliant holiday, and probably the only one I've had, if I'm honest, where I haven't spent the time running around islands and trying to find run routes and everything else. I lost pretty much all motivation to do any exercise whatsoever. So the timing was quite good. It's probably the first holiday I've ever had in my entire life where I actually did just sit down and reflect and read and recover, because I think it's been an emotional roller coaster of a ride looking after my dad and being with my dad and seeing him go, and then trying to collate my thoughts, really.
Well, and you are this amazing A-type personality of always want to do, go. And myself as well, I'm somewhat like that in terms of like beach holidays. I struggle to stay and just lounge sometimes. I think I'm a little bit more inclined to do that than maybe you normally are. But I think it's good, right? Sometimes you've been hit by a bus, right? Effectively, right? With your dad, Buster, everything else. And, when you get hit by a bus, right, you need to recover. So I think it was a really good break for you. I mean, I feel like my sister went away as well. She went away with her family actually for a week to the Maldives. Cause she was like, I mean, it's so expensive just for a week. I won't even say what it is, but she was like, look, life's short. Right. It's about experiences, as you always say, about creating the stories. And, she wants to create these experiences with her family. And obviously, her husband has got mobility issues anyway, as I might have said in the past. And so you don't know what it's going to be like in 3 years' time or 2 years' time or 1 year time. And you can always say, oh, we'll do it next time. And actually, I know your dad's death was kind of sort of expected every 2 years. Mine wasn't expected, but, they're both in their sort of 70s, 80s. But life is is really short, and you don't know when you're going to get those opportunities. So it's good that you went away. I think I need to do something similar. My mum's been away actually the last 2 weeks, first trip really ever by herself. So she went to Greece to sort out some of my dad's affairs, and luckily, so yeah, it sounds like she's had a lot of family connections there. I think she actually she's in Cyprus, I think, at the moment. She went for the weekend to Cyprus with my cousin's wife. So my cousin's quite a little bit older than me, and so she basically invited her to go to Cyprus for a few days. So they've gone to Cyprus. She'd never been to Cyprus before, my cousin's wife, and I think she's coming back on Friday, my mum. But it seems like hopefully it's been a good trip for her just to be connected with, I think, like lots of relatives that she hasn't seen for years or spent that kind of time with for years. So, she's had a little bit of a break, which is good.
It may just be tricky for her coming back. I think it's going away and then coming back to that empty house without your dad.
It will be.
That's for my mum's.
It's going to be, but hopefully we've had some good news in that, there's an offer there. It seems like a firm offer on the house. So fingers crossed it goes through, and hopefully by summer. So then she can kind of move out of there, and it's going to be weird because you're going to have to do that whole closure, or partly a closure thing, because at the moment, and you'll probably see this as well, you go to the family home, like your dad's stuff's all there, the slippers are there, the dressing gown is there, the chair is there, the feel of him is there. And then when that goes, I think it's important that I somehow bring some of that essence to that place she's going to move to. I know she sort of did that with my gran. There's like pictures of my gran everywhere and bits and bobs, and you need some of that essence there, because otherwise it's really hard, because suddenly there's nothing of that.
I've certainly had an opportunity to experience not just my version of grief, and I hit you, and I'd liken it to the waves that sometimes take you off your feet, and sometimes waves just kind of lap around your feet, and you can handle some better than others, and sometimes you're completely fine. But obviously I've got my sisters, my brother, and obviously you'd have felt the same. Everyone experiences it slightly differently. Certainly from my mum's perspective, being with my dad since she was 16 years old, 50 years married, which we talked about in previous episodes, seeing how she's coping with it, the ups and the downs. And I had a conversation with mum yesterday, and it was interesting talking, we talk a lot about mindset and words and how they can be really powerful if used, depending on how we use them. And she said, I can't cope, and I need him. And I said, we had a conversation. I said, well, 2 words that I've changed, mum, is you can cope. The 2 words we need to remove from our language is the word need and the word can't, right? You can cope and you will cope, but it's going to be incredibly difficult. And you don't need dad, you miss dad, because he's not here anymore, and that's really difficult. And it's okay to miss him terribly, but you will survive without him, as painful as that might be. And you can cope as a result. And she said that she had this dream where dad said, don't worry about me. I'm in a marvelous place, a wonderful place. I think the words that she used to me. And she believes that was dad's way of kind of reassuring her. When I said to her yesterday, you've got to try and think about this, mum. And this is only last night we had this conversation. I said, if you were to describe where you are right now, and at that moment she was at my sister's house where my sister was cooking her dinner and looking, all the, my siblings have been around looking after her. I said, if you were to describe your scene to my dad right now, I said, he would consider you being in a marvelous place too. You're with being the love of your family, you're sat in this place. So I said, try and imagine the fact that you're both in marvelous places. And when you do get that opportunity to meet again, if that happens, you can share those stories later. But the idea of removing the word can't, removing the word need, and trying to change it for something else doesn't take away the pain, of course. But I think it's a learning curve. And she's got the ashes back now, which was initially a comfort. And then you're on a high the following day, you're on a massive low, because there's a realization of what it is you're holding. So we're still slightly in the earlier phases of it. Just want to make sure she's okay. So it's remarkable and wonderful that your mum's got to get away to Greece, because I think it feels like my mum's a bit away at the moment.
She kind of wanted me to go when we were talking about it way back, and I didn't really want to go, and actually I think it was good for her to go by herself to get a bit more independence. She's similar though, she'll go and, she can't, what am I going to do? I'm all alone. I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. And I've got to be cautious. Like, I mean, she was super stressed the night before. So I was in Brighton and I'd organised the plane ticket, but also the train ticket. And then, there was an issue with her mobile because she hasn't got internet because she doesn't use it that much. So we decided to bin the internet and just hotspot off her phone. And then the nieces had accidentally used that hotspot and used up all the data. So then I was like, look, let's just change the package to an unlimited data. Then she had my dad's SIM card and something happened there. And she got into a whole panic about like they'd cancelled everything. So she was like really stressed. And I was obviously on the phone. I said, look, I'll sort it out. And, I sorted out reactivated SIMs and whatever else. But she was like super fragile, right? And so, yeah, I know where you're coming from with the idea of, can't and need. And it's about building them to the point where they realize that they can do things by themselves, because we're all capable of things. Like sometimes when you're in a relationship, obviously you have different roles. And so someone might do the cooking, one might do the pickup, might do the finances. It doesn't mean that we can't do them ourselves. Maybe the other person's more adept to it. But then when that person disappears, like in my dad's case, and your dad's case, suddenly they're overwhelmed with, I've got to do all of this stuff. And that idea of can't comes into their head.
This might make you laugh. Sorry to interrupt, Harry, but this might make the listeners laugh. I hope it makes listeners laugh as well, right? A friend of mine who came to the funeral, I haven't seen him for years, a guy called Ray Kerry, who's he works in sort of pest control and things. He turned up to see my mum, and he's been a family friend for many years. Anyway, he popped round and he called my brother and said, look, I'm really worried about your mum. And the funny thing is, I've got to just caveat this slightly. My mum would have done this regardless of what happened with my dad, because that's my mum. But she wouldn't have done it because obviously my dad would have taken this responsibility on. However, this is not the act of someone who's lost their marbles. I highlight this in advance. It's just what my mum would have done. But anyway, and funny enough, she did do this years ago without us knowing as kids. And I'll go into where we are. So he turned up and he called my brother and said, look, Ben, my brother, a bit worried about your mum. He said, I know he's lost your dad, but I've just turned up to see how she is. And he said, I've rocked up and she's painting the stairs. And he said, what? And he said, yeah, she's painting the stairs. She's got a tin of paint out. And we're talking about painting the carpet on the stairs, just to make this very clear. She said, well, one thing I've always wanted to do is I've always got a bit grubby with the dogs and feet when go up and down. So I wanted to make them cleaner. So she literally got paint out and painted the stairs white and magnolia.
The carpet? The carpet. Not the carpet.
The carpet. Yeah. So we all went down there after the funeral for the wake. And I'm looking at your face now, for those, isn't it? And yeah, she's literally had a can of paint and she's magnolia'd all of the carpet. And to be fair, they look great. I'm not sure they're as comfortable as they should be in bare feet. You wouldn't know to the eye, but
yeah.
She's painted right. She has since arranged for the carpets to be replaced, but it just made me laugh because the first chance she gets to do some of her own housework, something my dad would have done, she gets out a pot of paint and paints the carpet.
I mean, it is tough. I mean, like last week, I've been in the house trying to sort out things, and one of the things is, as you know, I love my sleep, and I'm really particular with my sleep. Now, the problem I've got in this house is that my sister, whose house it was before, put these lovely shutters in. However, shutters, and it's an east-facing window, bay window, do not do a great job with letting light through. So I took it upon myself. I brought different people around to try and suss things out and add bits and bobs. And in the end, I decided I'll do it a little bit more economically, and I'll put curtain rails up. So one on the side window, one on the bay window. And to be fair, I did it at the weekend or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it works. It's fine. But it was one of those things that I was thinking, look, this is, even though my dad wouldn't be doing it, I'd have him up here sort of sitting, kind of guiding me, about, because a couple of the holes were a bit weird to drill because of the wall, and the raw plug came out and one raw plug didn't go in enough. But it's interesting because I was also hearing him in my head saying, look, okay, if that raw plug doesn't go in, what you could do is you cut with the Stanley knife around it. So you don't have to like bash it in, you just cut it and it goes flush. And so, but it was one of those moments where I was, struggling in a way with the memory. And then also another time my mum sent, Google or these phones, they sometimes, actually I sent you some memories today. So those images I sent you of us cycling earlier today in the sand dunes, because Google gives me those memories, right, every now and then. And so there was a memory of my dad with all the pictures with my 5-year-old niece, Minnie. And so that came up a couple of days ago, and she sends it in the family group and stuff. And so all of that's quite hard. But actually, I still feel like I'm in shock. And what our listener, I can't remember the listener's name who sent us that lovely long voice message that you shared, Kirsten. Yeah. And so one of the things that, I didn't send it to my mum. I sent it to my 2 sisters because I thought it would be helpful. But the reason I didn't send it to my mum is because at one point Kirsten said, the second year is harder.
Second year is harder. That's the bit I remembered as well.
Yeah. Do you remember? Because she said like the first year is like, there's a lot of firsts. It's like your birthday without him, first his birthday, the first Easter, we're going to have Greek Easter in about 2 weeks' time. So it's going to be the first Greek Easter without him. And then there's also the admin, which is what we're doing now, lots of the admin that happens. So that first year is kind of tied up, and it's still that shock stage. And I was thinking about this, that the body is so smart, right? However the body evolved or was designed, it's so smart because it puts us into a state of shock. Because being in shock drives that adrenaline, drives that focus, drives that narrow focus that you can actually can do the things that you need to do in a stressful point. And so if it didn't do that, if you went into kind of grief and destruction straight away, you wouldn't be able to get anything done. So the body is so smart. Whoever evolved us or thought about this was like, you know what, when this stuff happens, we need the body to be able to cope. And so I think we're all probably still in shock and maybe denial as well, because I feel like I'm a little bit in denial. I think that's to do with the house as well. When the house hopefully gets sold, and then we have to create the realization of like, okay, here's that stuff I'm not going to take with us, and that's going to be really hard. So it's part of the process. But yeah, that really resonated. That second year is going to be worse. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, there is a thing, isn't there? Of, if it's good to prepare for the storms if you know they're coming, and then you know how to handle it when you get there, right? What I liked about your plug in the wall story with your dad is it's a good example of where we know that everyone's life has a limit. We know that when we're as humans, all life has a limit, but our legacy doesn't. And that the legacy of your dad and him as an engineering background lives on in you, and my dad's legacy will live on in the things that we see. And that's I find that really, really exciting. I'm trying to think of the things you'd have done.
I mean, to be fair, in the fridge downstairs in this house, actually, I've got 2 Tupperwares, which I haven't brought myself to eat. I think they'll still be okay to eat, but of what's called fava. It's kind of like I think it's like he only started cooking it recently, actually, but it's like done in the Greek way. I think it's like, I don't know if it's lentils or split peas or something, but it's kind of like done almost like, looks a bit like hummus or a mash or some sort. But really nice the way he's done it. But part of me, I was going to have it the other day because I needed something to eat, and then I hesitated, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to, because it's like kind of a meal. Like there are still meals in the freezer, both here and in London, that he's cooked. Like I remember on Christmas Eve, we had the spaghetti sauce that he made, and that was really emotional. And that was the last meal I've had of his, and I haven't brought myself to have his leftovers since.
Well, I know it's had an impact in a slightly different way. I sent an image to a colleague of mine. So you know that obviously we've talked a lot about sport and fitness on these shows, and nutrition as well. So I think my body wasn't quite ready for doing nothing for 2 weeks, and my numbers were quite impressive. So my weight went up by about 4 kilos in about 3 weeks, which I thought was quite impressive. I've actually got the exact numbers here. Someone I sent to a friend of mine, and my fitness score on things like Strava apps has absolutely plummeted. I just lost. You just kind of lose all your motivation to do certain bits. So I went from on the 24th of March to 79 kilos to now 83.6 in a month. I don't think I could have done that if I tried. I know that's going to be several months to try and shift it. But I read, I think I mentioned it before, I've been reading Cured, and we talked about that in previous episodes. And the guy who writes it quotes Hippocrates in there, and it says, before you try and heal someone, first ask, are they willing to give up the things that made them sick? And I came across that. Again, I thought, you know what? If I don't stop on my current trend now, being demotivated and eating everything and not exercising, I'm going to end up making myself sick. And I would argue it's sick through grief, but it won't be. It'll be sick because I've just stopped doing the things that make me healthy. So this week, I finally got myself back into gear. I've created in advance, as you know, with nutrition, I've started making my salads in advance. Everything's in advance so that I can't, no excuses, not reaching biscuits and stuff. But yeah, 83.6 kilos. So watch this space. So we'll do a podcast in the next 4 weeks or so. I'll see if I can get that back down. And you feel it in your body, right? You start feeling unhealthy, then you feel worse. And I feel like the grief's worse as well. All of it's
Everything's affected. I was actually chatting to a guy today. I met in the sauna after I did a hot yoga session this morning after a call I had, and then I met this guy, an optometrist here, who's got his life sorted now. He kind of goes in. He has his own business. He runs it one day a week. On the Tuesday, he goes in, and the rest of the time he's got a team of optometrists that do the work for him, and he does a bit of admin, and he's like, he says like, pay them well, and all this and the other. But he was talking about how he's recently, he didn't make the distinction, even though he was kind of into exercise for a long time, just how much that affected every other aspect of his life, like his business, his relationships, everything else. And how I think it's because right now it's also because he's injured as well. He's done his back in a little bit. And so he's kind of having to slow down because he's a bit all or nothing as well. He would like be, full on with it or then not at all. And now he's having to do a bit of a middle road and figure out different ways of exercising. But and I was saying, yeah, absolutely. I remember this as well. I've always been into exercise as well since I was 8 years old, probably, maybe even earlier. Obviously, I was into it before that with football and things like that, but like properly from about 8-9 years old. And I remember even having done that for like years. It was when I was probably around 28, 29 years old, I got injured, and I was working at the London Stock Exchange at the time, and I'd been injured. And I really noticed everything else not be as good in my life. And that's when it really there was like that aha moment when I was like, I need to be on it physically because it's going to create everything else. And the ancient Greeks, as you've just been quoting anyway, said healthy body, healthy mind. And I often think about that. So for me, actually, I've been getting back into hot yoga. So what's good about being new in a place, you get to do all these first time trials in these different places because you haven't been a member there. So I'm doing a 30-day hot yoga trial. And they've got 2 studios. So I'm flipping between the 2, and one's got a sauna. And a couple of times I'm going like 6:30 in the morning and go for a swim in the sea. Well, I say swim in the sea. I'm jumping in the sea for like 5 minutes. And it's pretty cold. It's like 12 degrees, 11 degrees. And then coming back, and it's like 9 o'clock, and I've done all this stuff already by 9 o'clock, and I'm feeling good. And I can feel my body is a bit like yours in that it will put on weight pretty quickly as well. Like I will do the same, 3 weeks, 3 kilos, no problem. But I'm quite lucky that my body, I don't know about the weight, but it definitely adjusts like muscular, like reasonably quickly if I do something consistently.
I thought something was quite interesting from my side is like everyone's been asking me, and rightly so, I say rightly so, like understandably so is the way of putting it. How are you? How are you? And they've been asking you, and you lost your dad. How are you, Harry? How are you feeling? How are you doing? How are you doing? And of course, it's the natural thing that everyone's going to ask. First thing I asked you when you lost your dad, first thing you asked me when you lost mine. And it's also the words that break you often, particularly if you're seeing someone that's really close. They say you, and you makes you emotional. And I think I've been saying I'm fine it's been 4 weeks since I lost my dad now, just over from the 18th of March. We're recording this 22nd of April. And I think it was the data, seeing the increase, that suddenly made me realize I'm not. So actually, I know, data can be a bad thing, and sometimes you need to forget it, need to rest. But I looked at that and thought, if I'm putting all that on, like it tells me I'm not doing the things that make me happy or keep me on point, or my nutrition's gone. I'm drinking a little bit more. I'm doing a little bit less. My weight is going, my health is going in the wrong direction. Actually, as much as I'm saying I'm fine to everyone that I see, I think it was a little bit of data that told me that I'm not. And it was what I needed. I know there's a lot of, you shouldn't get obsessed by weight and things like that. It's not really about that for me. It was just a sign that needed to trigger me back into action. I saw that when I got back, and it has triggered me back into action. It's given me a bit of a purpose again, give me some focus, give me some motivation. I don't know why I'd say it's been hard work because we haven't done anything for a little while. It hurts again getting back into it. But I think that was the first trigger that I'm not fine, or rather I haven't been fine, and now I need to get back to being fine by getting back on the treadmill, deliberate pun there, to get back onto things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think as Peter Drucker, like the famous management guru, says, like, you can't manage what you don't measure. And we're going to use different measurement metrics. I think having objective measurement metrics is a really good idea for some people, because, yeah, like you say, you think, I'm fine, which obviously sometimes people say as an acronym. Frankly, I'm not enough, or frankly, I've no energy, is the FINE on fine. So I try not to ever answer people with I'm fine, because in my head I click and go, actually, if I say I'm fine, I'm not really fine, or I've frankly got no energy. But I've noticed my stats, they change in this location as well. And I'm not sure if it's the hot yoga and the sea swimming, but my heart rate overnight is starting to go down again, back to where it was I got this weird illness just before COVID, maybe 4 months before I got a confirmed COVID. So October 2021. And ever since then, my Oura Ring, lowest heart rate overnight has been like a couple of beats, 2 to 3 beats, which might not sound like much to the listeners, but it's quite precise, the lowest heartbeat thing. And it's always been a bit higher, and it's not ever seemed to go down. And then now it's starting to go down. I'm not sure if it's the hot yoga, the sauna, or the sea swimming, or whether time has just happened. It's also only happened in the last week. And what happened about a week ago was I got this weird virus again, I think. I went to bed on Thursday night about 9:30. I was starting to feel a bit ropey on the Wednesday with being a bit bunged up. And then I was practically in bed really from 9:30 on Thursday until 9:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. I managed to get out for a 2-hour walk actually, which exhausted me on the Friday. But then after that, which was about a week or so ago, it's the heart rate's starting to go down. So I'm not sure if that kind of then kick-started something else. It's really weird.
It might. I wonder if there's an impact. I was just looking at that. If you saw me looking off screen, it's because you were talking about your heart rate thing, and something I've noticed since I lost my dad, my HRV score dropped quite significantly. So my average HRV pre-losing my dad was around 58 to 65, and everyone's got individual HRV, but when you track it over a long time, you get what is your average or your healthy score, your balanced score. Since losing my dad, and I'll tell you the date this changed. So it dropped. Yeah, literally. So I was going from 62, and actually the day I saw my dad, it dropped. So that's obviously stress on the body. It dropped down to 57, 56, and then lost my dad. And since I've lost him, went down to 50. My average HRV for the last 4 weeks has been 52, which has been in the low and unbalanced category. It's just starting to recover a little bit now, back up to 53 today. First time it's been up. And that's only 1 point score. I'm still in the unbalanced category. But it's interesting that obviously that will be not just the grief. It will be not exercising, eating poorly, sleeping poorly, because we all know sleep gets disrupted.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting on how it's impacted my heart rate and HRV post.
I mean, I definitely think there's something to it. But remember as well, you've spent 2 weeks in a different time zone. Time zone changing will
also
totally
true. 7-hour time zone. I'm still jet lagged now, to be fair. So that'll have an impact.
Yeah, so both ways. So,
although
but it would be interesting to see how it happens.
It did start to drop before I went away.
Yeah.
So it might be stress.
Because interesting, it'd be interesting to see what happens. Because again, my HRV used to be around 50, and then it's now dropped consistently to about 47, although a couple of times, like last night was 53, the time before it was 56. But occasionally I'll get in the high 50s or 60s, but generally speaking, it's kind of been a consistently dropped since that October 2021, because it's to do with, the higher your heart rate overnight, the lower your HRV will be. So if I'm at 46 beats per minute overnight, I'm going to get a lower HRV than if I'm at 43. And I typically am about 46 these days overnight, but I used to be at 43. So yeah, it's interesting to see, because you don't notice sometimes in yourself that stress and that thing build up. And then when you go away, I noticed, for example, when I go to Cyprus a couple of years ago, my HRV went into the 60s consistently. And it's because I was in the sun, grounding, even though my sleep was not great because it was a hot room and it wasn't pure blackout. And I think if I'd had a cool room and blackout, my HRV would be super high at that time. But it's just to show just how powerful that nature could be. That's why it would be interesting, like how your HRV wasn't higher in Nicaragua with being,
Well, I
in
mean,
the sea
in
or
terms of being in
full time.
nature, it was amazing. So we stayed at a place called Kalala Island, which is well worth a Google. It's like a luxury boutique island. It was unbelievable. I have to say, it was absolutely unbelievable. And what a wonderful
I think
place.
you showed me a couple of pictures, which looked amazing.
So, you're grounded all the time because I didn't go in flip flops. You stay in bare feet with your feet against the sand. I was on paddle boards. We did actually, the competitive bit did come out of me because me and Lucy did get the kayak record around the island, which was a whole 6 minutes and 50 seconds. We took 30 seconds off the previous record. So we're pretty happy about that. So yeah, it didn't take long to get around. I couldn't do any running around it anyway because I measured it at 480 meters you could have done it. It would have been a lot of laps.
Well, the whole island was 480 meters round.
The waterways. To walk around the whole thing. So yeah, pretty small. But yeah, we were grounded the whole time and in with nature. And you know what? The cacophony of sounds you get in the evening, because they were open cabanas, right? So birds could come in and lizards come in. You have an open hole at the top. And about 4 a.m. every morning, just an absolute cacophony of bird sounds. And you'd think there were 100 birds outside. I don't know what the bird was, but we got a little introduction when we arrived. And this particular bird can do 11 different bird sounds. So they have different calls, but it's one bird that does them all. And of course, they're all doing all the different sounds. You literally feel like you're in the middle of the jungle. And there's a mangrove on the island. So we found some wild sloths were there, stingrays sort of just floundering just outside the cabana in the water. And you do feel it was nice in nature, right in there. It does change you to be grounded, to be at one with it.
It changes you to be grounded, but also actually, maybe I was talking a lot about mindfulness today because I was doing a couple of talks for a client of mine for their organization. And I was talking about mindfulness from what I call an integrative approach rather than an intentional approach. So some people who are familiar with mindfulness, our listeners, or mindfulness-based stress reduction, there are certain practices that people can do, which I think are great. But my philosophy when it comes to health and well-being a lot of the time is how can one integrate things, whether that's movement or exercise into the day, and also mindfulness. So I was giving them some ideas along that. But one of the things which is a bit more of a conscious mindfulness approach is, listening 5 senses exercise, where 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, and so on. And going into the woods was one of the things that someone was talking about today, and as an example of when they do mindfulness. And it really is a good way of bringing you into that mindful moment because you're on holiday. Hopefully you haven't got your phone, anything like that. You're hearing these sounds, you're hearing these birds, and you're focusing on that present moment, as it were, or you're really concentrating on listening and saying, oh, is that the same bird doing 11 different calls or anything like that? So I think it's a really good opportunity, nature, to ground yourself and become more mindful. And when you're mindful, this is what we're talking about today, and what our whole podcast really is about, is that you get to make a choice about how you respond in a certain situation as opposed to an unregulated reaction. But one of the things I did want to ask you, because you're someone who does a lot of exercise, and exercise, especially with the cycles and the runs that you do, is an opportunity that a lot of people experience this thing called flow. And I was having this discussion with one of the guys at the organization I was working for today, because he was giving me some examples of his boss saying, oh yeah, he goes into mindfulness when he goes on cycle trips and this and the other. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I would categorize that state a lot of the time as mindfulness. And the reason is I feel like it was more flow. And because for me, my understanding of flow is usually when you get into a bit of a zone, time kind of disappears. It's not that you're actually actively aware of the thing you're doing at the time you're doing it. It's more that you're being carried along by something, that you're at one with the thing that you're doing. And I feel that that's where the distinction is for me, is that mindfulness, I think you're kind of participating a little bit more consciously about the thing that you're doing. Whereas flow, I feel like you're in an unconscious state of being at one with the thing that you're doing. And also when you're cycling, would you agree with that? Or
I would agree. I think there's a really interesting book, really small read here. If people are interested, go get it. It's an old book. I think it's written in the 70s. Tim Galloway, called The Inner Game of Tennis. He's done others, The Inner Game of Work and everything else. he talks a lot about flow, and he's the one that says that performance is potential minus interference or minus the noise. If you reduce the noise, you can increase, you can reach your potential and therefore maximize performance. But he talks a lot about flow state, and it's the idea of if you're I don't know. I always seem to forget it. I always say Ivanisevic, and he's an old tennis. He's the guy Djokovic. When he's playing tennis, right? When he's in his flow state, he's not really thinking about any shot in particular. He's just at one with it. He does what's instinctively natural to him, and he talks about in the book. The minute you point out what someone's thinking about or doing, is often when it all falls apart. So there's a little tip here. If you're having competitive sports and you see someone absolutely hammering you, you can ask them, "Oh, what is it you're doing differently this week?" And suddenly they'll get into their own heads and analyze it, and you might find their game starts to fall apart. But it's interesting because it's only when we start bringing awareness to that thing that we're doing that actually does the opposite of what you're talking about there. Really, is it takes flow away because we become aware. And I would argue that flow is when we are just at one with the thing that we are doing. It becomes instinctive, becomes habitual. I had a flow state run, so I knew I was running the other day. I've only had one in the last few months, and I've showed my friend what I did. I ran one of the best times I've run since 2016 for no real reason. I had a lot of stress. I'd been at my dad's house. He was still with us, and he'd been really sick. I just had to get out of the house, and I went, put my shoes on, no prep, and went for a run, and ended up running one of the quickest 10-mile runs I've ever done in my life. And every step just felt easy. I was obviously a lot of, frustration. Everything went out. And by the end, the run was just done. I can't even remember anything about the run particularly, except for the pace. It just felt effortless. And I came back and said to Lucy, "Oh my God, I can't believe the times. Went to do it." I've not been able to replicate that form since. It was just because I wasn't thinking about that. I was just needed to get out. It wasn't about the run. It wasn't about anything. It was about getting out of the house. So I think I've been in that state recently. Mindfulness for me would be, as you said, really, I'm in full agreement. It's when you actually are being consciously aware of what it is you're taking in your surroundings. You want more awareness in place. You want to be aware of what you can hear, aware of what you can see, but you can be mindful whilst running, but it's a different type of run.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's actually a brand of running called Chi Running, which I believe is this idea of mindful running. And I don't run so much anymore. I starting the training, and I'm doing it a bit more mindfully now because I'm adapting to barefoot trainers for running and things like that. And I'm also looking at my gait and my foot positioning and things like that. So I'm pretty mindful. And also when I'm looking at my breathing, so I'm doing my best to just do nasal breathing for as long as I can during the run. So I'm consciously like counting in the breaths and seeing how far I can push it without going to the mouth, breathe in. And so I'm quite mindful. I'm certainly not getting to a flow state, but I think you're right where you say almost like when you're in flow, being mindful drops you out of flow effectively.
Yeah, I don't think you can be in both, because in flow you're at peak performance.
No,
you can't be at peak performance.
I feel like they're
being mindful.
No, I feel like they're kind of opposite ends of like a seesaw. And that's what I was trying to get across to this guy, because he was saying, when I go to, he was talking about being in flow and mindful at the same time whilst being at a concert. And I was trying to work out because that's an interesting example, because you can really be taken in the music, really be at one with the sounds and the body and the lights, and also be lost at the same time. So a concert and the music was a really weird one, because I was thinking, are you mindful because you're present, you're feeling the beats, you're feeling that, or are you in flow? And I didn't really have an answer.
But even when you did that action, for those that are watching here, sorry to interrupt, Harry, but I think this still ties into what you're saying. The first thing you did when you talked about the music there is you shut your eyes, and are you at mindful? But you're not. You're in the music. If you're being truly mindful, you're not really taking in your surroundings, because your surrounding lives in your mind in that instance. You shut your eyes and you imagine your surroundings. I would argue if you're being truly mindful and really utilizing your senses, you should be listening to the music with your eyes wide open. And the music would also cut out the sounds of what's outside anyway. So I would still think they're different. they're still wonderful states to be in. But
absolutely.
I don't think being in flow or being mindful state is the same thing.
No, I don't think so. And I think with mindfulness, it's a state that it's a lot easier to drop into, right? You can do it like 100 times a day, 1,000 times a day, right? It depends on how you want to do it, right? It could be like, flow is way harder, and flow is, but I guess where people get confused with it is because somehow mindfulness is about focusing on one thing and avoiding the distractions of all the other things that go into the mind. And flow is somewhat similar, although I think what flow does is it takes away all those distractions, but it also takes away that singular point of focus that mindfulness aims to anchor you to, so that there is no mind. I haven't revisited the work of, I always forget his name, the guy that coined the word flow, the Michael Csikszentmihalyi or whatever his name is, you know, the guy I'm talking about?
I don't actually. I'll have to look it up. Flow was talked about extensively by Tim Galloway, and that was in the 70s. So it must be earlier than that.
It was.
Unless he's taken it from that book and done more research on it. I don't know.
No, I'll have to look up when it was, but I'm pretty sure he was the guy that coined that.
Game of tennis here. It's never too far. Look at that. It's next to Man's Search for Meaning on it's one of my favourite books. So,
nice.
What it says about him on flow.
Michael Csikszentmihalyi, I think his name is. We'll have to look him up, and I'll find out when he came, because I feel like it was in the 70s as well, but maybe it was the 80s. So anyway, either way, I haven't revisited his work for a few years. I know Stephen Kotler. I read, which one was it? Was it Stealing Fire, or was it the Reign of Superman, or whatever it was? But he talks a lot about flow, Stephen Kotler, and he was examining a lot of high performance athletes, those that really risk their lives for the things they do, be that wingsuit jumpers or rock climbers who don't use any safety harnesses, because there he was talking about that they get into flow states quite a lot where the mind gets out of the way. And I feel like to get into flow, you have to do things over and over again to the point where it becomes part of your automation, right? So a martial artist, if they're being attacked by someone, they may go into an automatic mode of routine and really hurt a person, but it wasn't like it was intentional. It was an automated response that they'd patterned in from years and years. And I feel like that's the same thing with flow, is that when you do something a lot of the time over and over, where you don't really have to think about the thing you're doing, like the run or anything like that, that gets you into that flow state. And I think it's that absence of mind. It's that one with the activity you're doing. So rather than a singular focus on the activity, which is two separate things, there's you and the activity observing the activity. I think flow is you being one with the activity, which actually I think goes back to a universal principle of us being one with everything.
For sure. I mean, Tim Galloway talks about it as being a state of flow. Interestingly, I had a quick look at it here to see if I could find the page. I want to find it myself. And it says the inner game of tennis is about psychology, self-esteem, communication, learning, peace, and high-level performance. But above all, it's about flow. Now, the book was written in 1972, but the flow was coined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which I think you mentioned.
I think his name is pronounced Csikszentmihalyi or something. Yeah, but you know
that was in 1990.
So was that before 1990?
No, 1990 he wrote the book, but he said the inner game of tennis, which came out in 1972, the original book does not call it flow and calls it peak experience. The later editions of the book have changed it from peak experience to the word flow. So I think that's quite interesting. So that's why I said, when the book came out, I wasn't familiar with them. Game of Tennis is like 100 pages long. You can read it really quickly. It's about self 1 and self 2. Interesting book, if those haven't read it, and it's well worth having a look at.
I haven't actually read that one myself. I need to check that out. I'm currently reading the Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson, who I've read his biographies on Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, and Steve Jobs. And he's a really good writer. I think he's a former. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've read a number of books on Elon Musk, so I'm not learning anything massively new, and I'm doing it on audio actually. But I do recommend Walter Isaacson, the Steve Jobs book, which is a massive book. I think I read in a week, and the Benjamin Franklin and the Einstein one. So I was definitely going to get that one. But I think
I'm watching Franklin on Netflix at the minute and enjoying that, which is pretty good. With it's quite good. Can't think of the guy's name. It's Catherine Zeta-Jones's husband, the American. I can't think of his name, but Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas. He's the main guy on it. It's interesting. It's good. He's obviously out in France, but that's good.
Is it on Netflix? I thought it was on Apple TV.
Oh, it might be Apple. No, I'm not sure. It's on one of them. It might be Apple TV. Yeah. And I'm reading "Designing the Mind" by Ryan Bush at the minute, which I'm enjoying. Which is kind of a theoretical and it's good. So lots of books. And I managed to do some reading while I was away, which is always nice to catch up on a few books and get yourself up to speed. But I think the flow state one as an interesting one. But I would agree with you. I like the pendulum. I like the pendulum thing. You were talking about Einstein. Wasn't Einstein that said that problems can't be solved by the same mindset that created them? Was that Einstein?
Yeah, I mean, it's often attributed to him. I don't know if anyone ever really said it, but yeah, that you can't solve problems on the same level of thinking as that created the problem, which is true, right? Like totally true. I mean, I see this all the time, right? I think I've told you this before, my analogy for health, like health equals health. And every time we try and add something bad to one side of the equation, we try and add something more to that to take it away, right, instead of take it away. And so we're not solving the problems because we're creating. It's the same level of thinking that created it that's trying to solve those problems. So instead of taking away the bad things, like let's say, for example, we've got an obesity epidemic, right? It could be the chemicals in the food. It could be the poor quality food. It could be the way urbanization has happened. And actually, it's everything, right? But instead of taking away those things, we develop Ozempic, right? Or we develop gastric band stuff, or we develop whatever. And it's like, no, just take away the problems that caused the issue, and you're going to resolve.
Doesn't that completely take us full circle from the one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard recently from Hippocrates? Whereas before you try and heal someone, first ask, are they willing to give up the things that made them sick? I think that's just genius. That was years ago, but it's genius. How often? Look at me. I've put on 4 kilos and I feel unwell. You know, down to me, right?
Hippocrates also said, right, all health begins in the gut. And I know we're going to do a talk about gut health at some point. So, and I think he knew the stuff. He actually, is interestingly enough, right, one of my theories, like out there theories, is how like all these people, right, whether it's ancient Greeks or whether it's ancient Indians, they have this idea, they have these philosophies that basically are timeless and they seem to work and they seem to know about things. Now, some of that comes from evolution, maybe, or like thousands of years of doing different herbs and working out what works. But one of my more out there theories is this idea of that they were told this stuff, right? They were instructed by possibly higher beings from, whatever, that these things are valid and true. And last night I got into this, I didn't watch all the show because it's like 6 seasons long and I couldn't invest in it, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it went off air about 15 years ago. So I don't think it's really spoiling it, but it's a show called Battlestar Galactica. Now there was a movie back in 1979 that you might have watched, I think, called
I've heard of Battlestar.
I certainly watched it.
It
was like a poor man's Star Wars, right? And it came out like 2 years after Star Wars and it was a bit camp and whatever else. Anyway, around 2004, 2005, they made a series. And I remember a guy from work raved about it. He was always into it. I never got into it. Went for 5 seasons. And it was like humans who had gone off world and they're being hunted down by effectively androids that they've created, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, went for 7 seasons. And they are escaping from all these Cylons, they're called, and they eventually are looking for the 13th colony, which is Earth, right, which is where they came from. And in the final episodes, they find Earth, right? You see them going over the moon and they find Earth, but it transpires that that's not actually the Earth they were talking about. Their Earth is like 100 million light years away, and this Earth is our Earth. And actually they land 150,000 years in our past. And they see the locals there and they're still just about learning to use tools to hunt. And so they decide to start civilization all over again. And they fly all their spaceships into the sun and they start. And basically the upshot being that these people that we thought were humans of our future, they were actually humans of our distant past who have then come back. And so some of me thinks like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I think sometimes might have happened, right? Like we might have had this technologically advanced civilization or race come to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago and give us some of this input, because some of the things that I've come across, it's hard for me to describe some of them, lead me to that conclusion. I don't know.
Well,
it's an out there theory,
I mean, but it's like a lot of people criticize mythology, right? But mythology is a collection of ancient stories that have been pulled together over thousands of years of collective wisdom of, you know, what people see as being healthy human behavior. And we can either dispel it and shut it out due to what we call modern medicine, modern science, modern pharmaceuticals, because that's what we're taught to believe and what we see in life, or we can go, actually, maybe it's not well outdated after all, because some of the basics are the things that we should be listening to, and that's listening to the body and wellness being innate and all those kind of things, right? So
mythology is actually getting proven and proven, like more the Greek mythology. Like I think Troy, the Battle of Troy, which was always thought to be a myth, is now like maybe there's more to it because they've discovered the ancient cities of Troy, I believe. And I think even 100 years ago, they discovered the palace at Heraklion in Crete, which might be the basis for the mythology around the labyrinth and the Minotaur and things. So I don't know. And also, all these ancient cultures have got similar stories. They've got stories around the flood, right? There's been a great flood when lots of civilizations were lost. I'm not sure if you've watched this. I think I mentioned it to you before, but I think it's called the Zeitgeist movie. Zeitgeist. Have I mentioned it to you before? I mentioned it to a friend the other day.
I think so.
Oh, please
Those aren't just the Levelers album. One of my favorites growing up, but that's something.
No. Zeitgeist. It's about 18 years old now. I'll see if I can find it and send you a link to it. But it talks about all these different cultures and how they all have the same story, like very similar to Christianity, like Jesus, like rising after 3 days, blah, 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 all of this sort of thing. I actually might rewatch it because I tend to watch it once every 5 or 6 years, just to kind of.
You also do watch some terrible movies, so maybe you rewatch it first, and then you can still, if you still
definitely watch it.
You can let me know. I'll watch it.
It's not a movie. It's kind of like, but you still haven't watched What the Bleep Do We Know? That one as well. Please watch those two. What the Bleep Do We Know? I sent you the link. I sent you the link to it. What the Bleep Do We Know and Zeitgeist. So audience members, if you have watched either of those documentaries, please comment on one of our Instagram things about what you think about that. And if you haven't watched it, please look them up. Zeitgeist movie. There's 3 of them, but watch the first one. And then the What the Bleep Do We Know. Please watch those, guys.
Here we go. Well, that's probably a good place to end today's conversation, right? So we're going to be bringing back conversation. I mean, today was really much a bit of a catch up. We've been away. We didn't want every episode to be about grief and about loss. We've been there for quite a while because obviously we've been through quite a lot. We've lost Harry's dad, my dog has been, we feel like we need to move the conversation on a little bit, but at the same time, it's really difficult to do so when all the things that are in the front of our mind are the things that we've been dealing with in real time, right? And these are real conversations. So me and Harry are really keen to bring gut health to the fore. We're going to talk about that in our next episode. And we talk a lot about sleep on this show, and serotonin, as an example, just one of the many chemicals, is something that's produced in the gut. So, I think we can bring some insights to our listeners. It'd be really interesting. And also, I'll give you a bit of an update. I just made a note to myself, and I forgot to mention it earlier, Harry, but you were talking about your saunas and your hot yoga. Well, watch this space. For the past 4 days, I've got into and talking about data on our watches and things, got into a habit of having a sauna direct immediately before I go to bed. And the deep sleep numbers on my gadgets have gone through the roof. And I don't know if it's because I'm jet lagged, which it could be, and I just need the sleep because I haven't slept that well since my dad passed, or if it's because I've changed my bedtime routine. So I'll need to have a little bit more data, a bit more consistency. But next time we meet, I'll let you know if that's still staying.
It will probably be the sauna, I imagine, because your body becomes really
raises
hot,
it,
and then
exactly, and then
raises the core temperature, but then it drops it because of the
and dropping body temperature creates melatonin in the body, or it's a trigger for melatonin production. So we're going to talk about melatonin. We'll talk about serotonin and other things we produce in our next episode, which is going to be about gut health. We promised it. We'll do it. And I look forward to having a really good conversation, I think, where we're probably going to be in agreement about lots of stuff, but it'll be an interesting chat.
What I'm curious about is obviously you're doing your 3-month journey. So you're probably about 2 months into it anyway by now, or maybe even, so I don't know if you've kept that up. Don't tell us just yet. We'll find out. And then you're doing a lot of the research. I think I've sent you a couple of articles as well on gut health and the Healing Leaky Gut website or something like that. Yeah, exactly. So you'll probably be a little bit more up to date than me, but I'll do a little bit of my own research on that as well.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Check us out on Instagram. You can watch these on YouTube as well. Follow us, share the show with your colleagues and friends if you can. You never know what someone around the corner is going through. It might just help them if they're going through grief, they're going through loss. I think the one thing to bear in mind with this show is everyone, whether you're listening to this now, whether you introduce it to someone else, everyone is fighting a personal battle of some sort. So be more kind. That's one thing we should all take away. And you never know, maybe this show will help them. So if you can share it and leave us a review and pass on the love, that'd be hugely appreciated. And I look forward to catching you, Harry, mate, in a couple of weeks. Really good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show.